Yeah, exactly. Elected members' expense policy. So we have Warwick and Rose, just Warwick and Phil. Okay. Councillors will note that we are not seeking to adopt the childcare package this year, and that's because of obvious financial reasons, but that will be revisited next year. And I think the only other significant change is to have the travel of the Mayor and the Deputy referred to, validated by, I think is the word I'm being told to use, the Chair of the Audit Committee, who is an independent person, or one of her other independent reps. But I'm happy to move this, or move seconded, and I'm not putting it yet. Warwick, is there anything you want to add to it? And then I've got some people. We'll put questions and comments together as well, I think.
Just to point out the timing around this, you'll notice that a lot of the local board feedback was in support of what we included in the report at the time, which was to support childcare allowances and so on. So I need to just point out the timing on that. That was pre-COVID times, and so things have changed since then. And I think that's the main comment I'd make, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. So we begin at the top of the question comment list with Shane Henderson, who was one of those that will be affected by our decision should we take it to defer. But Shane.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I want to briefly acknowledge staff. Want to acknowledge Member Poppelbaum from the Hibiscus and Bays Local Board, with whom I worked well on this proposal here before COVID-19 hit. And just briefly acknowledge LGNZ's Young Elected Members group that pushed for this proposal as well. This was proposed to be cut, and I support that actually. Needing to find something like $750 million, meaning something that didn't exist yesterday, would need a hell of a case for investment today, and I understand that. I know it's not necessarily a popular view for every elected member, because we have discussed this over some across the country and across Auckland as well. And I want to acknowledge all the parents and young people involved in governance across the city and their views on this. I support C, but as someone with a young family, as the Mayor has pointed out, I know firsthand the difficulties in doing this 24/7 publicly demanding job while also juggling the demands of family life. So I support C with that proviso that has now been included, that we revisit this idea for a debate and discuss this together prior to the next local elections, so that we can, in my view, go out to the communities and encourage young people to stand for this table and for local boards, safe in the knowledge that help will be there to actually manage the job. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Henderson. And next is Councillor Casey.
This is where I'm missing Councillor Penny Hulse, because she would be nodding across the room because she would know what I'm about to say, because I've raised it every single time the elected members' expense policy has come before us, and that's payment for alcohol using ratepayers' money in any shape or form. And she'd be nodding now to amend or to second an amendment. So I don't know if I've even got a seconder, but I've got one. That's great. We've taken alcohol out of this expenses policy, but it still pops up in two places. The first is third-party expenses when we have visitors, and that's I'll point to the relevant clauses if I can find my glasses. And that's on our page 198. The council will not pay for any alcohol except for the approved entertainment of third parties. See paragraph 11.9. It's actually 12.9. And if you go to 12.9, you'll see that serving alcohol may be permissible at some council events. I have a constituent in Mount Roscoe that I think of instantly every time this comes before us, because he is adamant that his rates should not be used in any shape or form to pay for alcohol. So that's the first time it's mentioned. So we've got events and we've got third party. And I just put it to you that one of our aims in the Auckland plan is to reduce harm from alcohol. At the same time, we are allowing it to be. I think if you want alcohol, you pay for it yourself, basically. And the Mayor will now give his speech about foreign entities coming into this country to be hosted by the council that expect alcohol. Actually, the Mayor's budget could pay for that. All right, so that's it. I would like to see the alcohol provisions removed from this so that we are an alcohol-free council with regard to ratepayers' money. Hey.
Thank you. I feel obliged to take the next call in response to that. Warwick or Phil, have we spent a cent on alcohol? I'm just trying to think of an event that I've been at that's a council event, either hosted by myself or anybody else, where we've had alcohol.
Swearing in.
With swearing in was probably one exception to that, was it?
I don't think I could be really specific. What I could say is that there is absolutely minimal occasions where there is council supplied alcohol. Yeah, it's a fairly rare event, Your Worship.
Yeah. And I just want to add to that on occasions when I have groups up into my office, and sometimes do for an evening event, the cost of any alcohol served there is met not by the Mayor's office, but by non-council funds. So I accept what you say, Councillor Casey, and I'm probably the stingiest Mayor that the city will ever have in terms of expenditure, and I don't intend to spend money on alcohol, but there may be the odd occasion where you have to host some event where somebody is visiting, where there is wine served with a meal, and that is then covered by all of the other things there that says that it must be modestly priced, etc. I am very well aware of the front page of the Herald Test. And there is no way that I'm going to see ratepayer money abused, but there will be. I just want to say that there can be, although I can't think of the last occasion when it happened, a situation where somebody is visiting and whether it's the Mayor's office that pays for it or anywhere else, that's still council money. So we probably would do it out of the Mayor's office. It would be used really and very modestly, and I'm not particularly fussed about the whole issue, and I don't want to make an issue of it, but I just want to give those assurances. Right, we have Councillor Coombe.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a partai. At paragraph 27, it says about staff are seeking from the Remuneration Authority their advice on the issue raised by local boards regarding active modes of transport and whether this all comes down to the definition of a vehicle. I just wondered where that discussion had ended up.
There has been some brief discussion with the Remuneration Authority's office, and my understanding of that discussion is that there wasn't a clear indication one way or the other, but an invitation to us to make a submission. But basically our approach in this today is to not recommend anything additional to what we already have.
Thank you. I don't think it goes to any particular change in the policy. Other than it's good to see that there's more encouragement for using public transport. I think the expenses policy has often been very bogged down about parking. We pay more attention to our car storage than we do for looking after children or other expenses that members might have. So I think it's going in the right direction, but there's potentially some more thought that needs to go into how we are encouraging all elected members to consider how they travel and the incentives that we put in place. So that was a little added comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Just to remind councillors that did want to finish by lunchtime, we'll need to keep rattling through. Councillor Darby.
Thanks. Councillor Coombe has asked my first question, so I think that should be picked up at some stage. I note under the climate change statement and further into the policy, it's under 6.3, elected members are expected to use public transport in the first instance. And I then go through to 9.3, car parking is related to airport parking. Can we add the words or public transport there? I've raised it with Mr McNaughton earlier because, look, we're investing in Puanui. We've already got a bus service, multiple bus services to the airport, but we're investing in Puanui. I would hope that we are all signing up for that as our preferred way to go to the airport rather than be taking the car parking. So quick question, can there just be a minor amendment to add the words or public transport there?
Yes, my suggestion there would be words that express council's preference for public transport. At the moment, that table is a list of items that you can claim expenses for. And it says for airport car parking, if it's more economical for the elected member to leave his or her car at the airport rather than take a taxi, etc., if you add public transport at that point, public transport is always going to be more economical than car parking at the airport. You're forcing the member to always take a bus, which might not be appropriate at some times. So I think if we just add a sentence which expresses the council's preference, which is the word that you used as well, I think, that for public transport, that would cover it.
Okay, look, that's fine with me. I'll just leave it there. But I do home in on that particular clause 6.3. Elected members are expected to use public transport in the first instance. I would actually like to know. I know a lot of people around this table really make a big effort, but I think we need to make an even bigger effort as well. And we're going to have to start living what's in our climate action plan. You know, we've signed up to it, and here's a case. If I can just say, if you look at the subsidy of the car parking in the basement of 135, it runs into tens of thousands of dollars. Our car parking in the basement of 135, if you price it at $25 a day, that's a pre-COVID price, it's probably half that at the moment, multiply that out, it's a multi-$1,000 subsidy to each and every one of us. That eventually ratepayers pick up because we could actually sell that car parking to the private sector for demand. But I think we need to really home in on this one. The next time we look at this expense policy, I'm probably like Councillor Coombe, I'd really like to home in on some of the things that our boards have raised and really push this public transport priority absolutely first, not just in words, that we actually go and live it.
Thank you very much. Some of us, unfortunately, aren't blessed with having public transport services, Deputy Mayor, that come anywhere near where we live, like tens of kilometres away. Councillor Cooper.
I was just going to ask, where do I sign up for my ergometric assessment?
Councillor Collins wants to answer that question.
I was just going to say, I've had one of those ergonomic, or whatever they call them, and that's why I've got a desk that goes up and down. Sorry.
So, Councillor Cooper, talk to Councillor Collins. I'm coming to you shortly, Councillor Collins. Councillor Hills.
Thank you. I understand the COVID-19 impacts, but what the council did support the childcare allowance pre-election, and I kind of assumed it was already in there. I guess for me, it's just what indication did we give to those? You know, I feel for and looking at the numbers, it's 10%. 10% of our total elected members have children under 14. So for me, it's like that's potentially an issue that only 10% of the elected members that are here for representing all of Auckland have kids. So clearly, and you can't join the dots clearly, but from all the anecdotal evidence from young elected members was that it is more likely that younger people or people who are parents or people who cannot afford childcare or the constraints that come with having kids, they're less likely to stand for office. So I guess we just have to be really careful here that we're not further ingraining a position where people with kids feel find it a lot more difficult to stand. I mean, I don't have kids, but I think that for a city like ours and with a growing young population, more and more kids are becoming the majority, that we don't have probably the equal number of parents on our elected member pool that actually fit the population. So it's not representative of all of the actual population. It's not even close. So I just wonder if we keep ingraining that those limitations, then we're never going to get the mix of people on our boards.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Collins.
Oh, thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to, I agree with the take that Councillor Henderson has on point 3 for childcare. And I just wanted to clarify though, Councillor Henderson said we'll relook this before the next election, and the writing says 2021. Is that what you mean by before the next election? Because that's a year before the next election. That timing is correct?
It's not a hard and fast date. We're just saying now is not the right time, perhaps in a year's time.
Okay, in a year. So cool, that's fine. And I just wanted to make the comment that I think it's similar to Councillor Hills. We've got to make consideration for parents. I had the ability yesterday, and thank you to Sandra, where we had a family emergency late at night, so I had to stay home with baby, and so I came into the meetings by phone. And so I guess that the ability to have that level of flexibility is what we're looking for. So it might not be childcare costs, but Skype could be part of the answer. Skyping in could also be part of our public transport answer as well. So I think a wider look at this is needed. I wanted to note that I wasn't sure that EAP was in the policy before, but I note that it is under 4.4, and I think it's really good. I pay my own supervision costs because I used to be a youth worker, and supervision, which is kind of like EAP but different to EAP, is something that I pick up on my own, and I think it's really good. If councillors feel, or elected members feel they need it, then by all means take it up, because I think it's a really useful service. And just finally, I wanted to confirm with Councillor or Dr. Casey if she was just floating the idea of an amendment, because I was happy to second an amendment, because I hear the comment around using it very rarely, the ability to pay for alcohol. But like my supervision costs, I just think if you're hosting someone and you need a glass of wine as part of your meal, you pick it up on their behalf and everything else can be covered by council. But I'm not sure if you've moved that amendment, which I'm happy to second, Dr. Casey. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the issue is not where you're hosting a single person, but if there's a delegation coming from somewhere. Look, it is rare and unusual, and I'm sympathetic with the viewpoints of both councillors. Councillor Mulholland.
Thank you, Worship. Your Worship, just with regards to a point of order or clarity, please, if you wouldn't mind. When Councillor Casey raised the issue, Councillor Henderson waved his hand and said, I second that. And now Councillor Collins has just made his statement with regards to that. So my understanding, and can I please be corrected, because I need to know what is the appropriate way in which we are working under standing orders. If it is seconded, then could you just clarify, because Councillor Henderson, you did wave out quite clearly that you second that, and I heard you say that from here. Could you please, that's just one point, could you please just clarify for me, because I want that clear about what standing orders.
No, fair point. For an amendment to be moved, it needs to be moved formally and seconded, and usually it's in writing to me, or to Sandra. So I think Councillor Henderson was showing his approval for the principle rather than claiming to formally second.
Okay, well then we need to be really clear when we do that, just how that reads. And whilst I understand we can amend, it just seems a little ad hoc in my perspective. So I'd like to say that just having witnessed ATs host people at an event when I walked in to talk about some training, there were a whole group of people in their boardroom drinking, and I said, oh, what's happening there? And it was actually an event. So we need to also be mindful what our CCOs do and how that looks to people like myself and others. And whilst I'm happy to pay for my own alcohol, and well and truly do, I do agree with the principle that we have to host guests, but we shouldn't be providing on an ad hoc basis any alcohol. So kia ora, thank you.
Thank you. Just to clarify, any of the CCOs, this policy relates to the parent body, not the CCOs, if that's correct. Okay, thank you. Councillor Bartley.
Oh, thank you. I was just picking up on the comments being made around how we behave and how to change our own behaviour. And I think it's kind of sad that it has to come through the expense policy. So where do we have that space or that opportunity to talk about those things rather than try and get us to act a certain way through expense policy? Is there another way, or is it through this? Because I'm still going to take my car to the airport because I want to catch my flight. But yeah, you know, there's other things coming through. So where do we have that discussion?
Well, I think if there are some related issues that councillors wish to discuss, then I think a workshop would be the appropriate vehicle. I think, as Warwick said, you need to be very careful with something formal like an expenses policy, which is endorsed ultimately by the Remuneration Authority. That's why Warwick has suggested wording like preference for, rather than something that's very restrictive and not pragmatic in terms of airport travel, for example. So I would caution people to do anything too ad hoc here in terms of the wording of what's quite a formal piece of policy endorsed out of Wellington by the Remuneration Authority. And we can workshop broader questions with you. Just finally, this is about elected member expenses policy. It's not a body of policy more broadly for conduct in the organisation.
Warwick?
I thought I should just point out to members, under section 2 in the policy itself, the section is titled Overarching Principles. So these principles apply widely. We're looking at specific rules and instances and so on, but anything that might not be covered in the policy will be covered by these principles, and they're based on what the Auditor General calls sensitive expenditure, which is expenditure which could be seen to be of personal benefit to the member. And so the principles include things like there's got to be a justifiable council-related business purpose, it's got to be moderate and reasonable, having regard to the circumstances, be actual and justified by an original receipt, and be within budget and so on. So the key thing is to ensure that the policy overall reflects a conservative approach.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Bartley?
Yeah, and I'm happy with these. I mean, I'm happy with C. It's not likely I'm going to have a child anytime soon.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Filipaina, last...
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, if the amendments are going to be put up, I'll be talking to that, and I think you've covered what needs to be covered around that amendment. So are we speaking to the amendment now, Your Worship? Because...
yeah. Thank you, Councillor. I'm just trying to sort it through because I didn't pick up that it had been moved formally, but now I'm told that it has been moved formally. And the amendment is to remove from section 9, I don't know why it's under travel expenses, it's to remove alcohol from the table. It's under attachment A. I'm just trying to figure out that still leaves stuff in at 12.9. So I'm just a little unclear as to what the impact, and maybe I'll ask Warwick to give us some advice on that. And then I'll accept the amendment, and we can go through the amendment and debate it again if you like.
Sorry, Your Worship, I'll be voting against the amendment in regards to it as a result of what you've outlined, as a result of what's been outlined over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And also as a result of what we've been advised by Phil Wilson in regards to this, and it's around the delegation. It's not around, hey, let's open the bar on the level 2 and just get on I was going to say get on the thing, but I won't. But then, look, on the terps, instead of what I wanted to, I shouldn't have, but I haven't. No, so that's why I've asked, because I will be sort of one speaking against it, and so it's Warwick.
Yeah, I think we need some clarification around it. The difficulty is with when we make an ad hoc amendment, there are consequentials in other parts of the policy, and we haven't had the chance to work through this. I'm hearing what councillors are saying, and really I don't give a damn either way. Warwick, if we remove what's the impact removing alcohol from attachment A? And it still stays in at 12.9.
Yeah, 12.9 it's the paragraph where it starts, serving alcohol may be permissible at some council events, and then sets some parameters around it.
So
the main concern I would have about removing it is that it's removing some guidance, like it's the staff that implement the policy or are involved in implementing it, and it just removes some guidance for staff there, which there are some specific rules. A suggestion is that where it starts, serving alcohol may be permissible at some council events. It could be more hard-lined. It could say serving alcohol at council events should be the exception.
Yeah.
Chair, sorry.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Yep. Point of order, Councillor Casey.
Specifically worded it so that the events you win, that I think there should be or could be exceptions to the rule. My amendment is to the third party. When you go overseas and you provide wine, you should be paying for it for yourself. So it's section 9, not section 12. that I'm amending.
So no, thank you for that clarification. So if, according to your amendment, section 12.9 would stay in place. The alcohol section of attachment A would be removed. So just again, I want clarification of what that would effectively mean from Warwick, just so we know what we're voting on, which is always helpful. Okay, sorry. The attachment A, item 12, is on page 198, and 12.9 is on page 202. So I'm just trying to, the worst thing we can do is to make amendments if we don't know what the implications are, and I'm just trying to get clarification around the implications.
Yeah, it's that one under section 9.
Your Worship, while they're doing this, can I just make, can I just...
Councillor Filipina.
Yes, sorry, Your Worship, I'm just going to make a suggestion, and it's based on the fact that this amendment is ad hoc. Could we look at coming back when we have a look at C and reviewing it? It allows councillors Casey and Collins enough time to get an amendment that is not ad hoc, and that can be brought to the governing body. It's just a suggestion, Your Worship, because C's been up there. I just wanted to sort of put that.
Thank you, Councillor. I think that's very sensible, but I'm in the hands of the mover and the seconder. I'm not casting any aspersions on what the mover and seconder are trying to do, but I'd really like to make sure that we knew fully the implications of it. So I'm really put it back to Councillor Casey if she'd like. Can we set this up so that we can have a discussion around how this policy might be tightened, or whether we would go as far as removing any payment for alcohol in any circumstances? I just think we need to do that in a slightly more considered way. I don't have any particular vested interest in it, and I don't utilise the availability of the policy very often. But a function like the inauguration, I'd feel it'd be a little sad if we couldn't rely on councillors to have the maturity to have a glass of wine to celebrate a really important occasion. And I wasn't quite sure what removal of the page 198 provisions would do. Have you got your head around that one yet, Warwick?
So this is under the section travel expenses, is that correct? Yeah. And it's on the table. The title's alcohol, and it's just above the car parking one. Your Worship, I remember previous discussions, I think, to do with using alcohol and overseas travel and so on. And it's, from memory, originally it was fairly liberal, and each time it's discussed it's been kind of cut back. I think really it's a political decision, Your Worship.
I'm just trying to think, for example, at the Tripartite Summit, we have an occasion where we have a New Zealand night, and we do serve New Zealand wines on that occasion, and that's paid for, I guess, through ATEED. And one of the things about New Zealand Night was to promote New Zealand products and New Zealand. We had a Maori fashion parade and the promotion of maybe it was sponsored, I don't know, but I just before we jump in and do something, I'd just like to know all of the implications, which is why I think Councillor... okay, somebody's waving hand. Shall I take a call from Councillor Simpson?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Who's looking to find a sensible outcome.
I am going to find a very, very sensible outcome as your Chair of Finance. And it goes like this. I do not believe ratepayer money should be spent on alcohol. We are blessed in this region with some fantastic wineries that are out west, on Waiheke, and all over the show. I think we should look at getting it sponsored, if there's anyone that would be interested in that. I don't believe that when elected members travel that the ratepayer should pick up their wine. I am a huge fan of when you have an overseas delegation. I know how these things work, as do you. And wine is often part of the, just like in culture, it is the food, so it is the drink. But I don't think ratepayers' money should be used. So I think we should look to seek sponsorship for this type of thing first. And if that wasn't forthcoming, have another look at it. But I do not think ratepayer money should be funded, and I think you would get easily a sponsor.
So I have a speaking list on this. So I'm presuming that the mover and the seconder of the amendment want to let it stay in place.
The second is departing.
No, the seconder was actually Councillor Collins. Yeah. Okay, no problem. So I'm just double checking that your preference is to leave it in place now or to do further work on it. I just need to clarify
as long as
that.
you're clear, Mr Mayor, it's about travel by elected members on council business in New Zealand or overseas spending ratepayers' money on alcohol. So it's not about your events, they're in a different section. So I don't think, like
that's just been confirmed. Okay, I'm relaxed about that then. Totally relaxed about it. Okay, so do we need further debate on that, or are we ready to vote? I have got a speaking list if people want to continue to speak on it. No, you've got to take your turn, Councillor Hills. It's Councillor Bartley. I've got you at the top of the list. No? That's from the previous. Councillor Filipaina is in the gallery, and he's spoken already. It is Councillor Hills.
No, I guess Kathy Casey kind of confirmed what I was trying to get out. We're debating things that aren't on the table, but I think what would make it clearer and easier for everyone is if it was clear what the wording would be. And I think the wording would be, under that bit, all it should say is the council will not pay for alcohol. So it's under the travel expenses. So it's giving us an out in case we're hosting someone and we can shout them a beer or wine, but I'm pretty sure all of us could do that out of our own pocket very, very easily. That is all that is saying, and that it's not about all the other issues we're talking about. If the words were just changed to say because it's under travel expenses reimbursed, it should just say the council will not pay for any alcohol, full stop. And then that means if a councillor put in their receipt for their meal, they would just have to cross off the 2 wines and they get back the meal on their, which none of us go overseas anyway for council hardly. But I think that's it. Am I right, Councillor Casey? That would make it.
Thank you. I think that clarifies it quite nicely. So you're happy to change it. So under alcohol, it just reads the council will not pay for any alcohol, full stop. And this relates solely to councillors or elected representatives travelling. It doesn't relate to the occasions we've talked about. That clarifies it nicely for me.
It doesn't for me.
Okay, I'll come. You're next on the speaking list, Councillor Cooper.
It says here, approved entertainment of third parties. Now, you can go somewhere like, I don't know, I went on a waste management trip. That's been the sole thing I've done in 7 years to Adelaide. There was a couple of us that raced over there, like 2 nights. But we were hosted by other councils. And they're buying you drinks. Looks pretty bad when you can do it yourself, but it's not about, buying a drink for another person. It might be that you are being hosted by another council, but there's some sort of, in some places and some cultures too, a reciprocal expectation. And culturally, it could be offensive. And that's, they give all their hospitality and then you just sit there and do nothing. And those are the sort of things I'm talking about. I've got no problem shouting someone a drink and paying. My expectation is always that we never apply to be reimbursed for alcohol for ourselves and somebody we've subbed. This is about the mayor maybe hosting somewhere, maybe in Taiwan, maybe somewhere, you know, and we're doing that. I have no problem with that. You know, we're getting a bit wowsery about alcohol. Food's, you know, it's no different to me as food. It's a part and drink sometimes. And I think we can get too hot under the collar. What we came to last time, it says it's got to be approved first. It's got to be within the parameters of sensitive expenditure set by the Auditor General. That's pretty tight already. And I just think we're being a bit, you know, look, the trouble with us is we come from a Victorian colonial structure where everything was bad. You know, we might go to Europe, we might go to other places where it's quite different and people don't have that view. And I hate to see us being the meanies when we're overseas and not doing our part. And that's why I just think what we've got is perfectly all right. This has got to be approved entertainment. This is not me buying a bottle of wine and then claiming back from council for myself. That doesn't mean that. And I think we're taking it too far, so I can't support the amendment.
Thank you very much. Councillor Newman.
Thank you. Interesting. Your Worship, I actually, it's probably already been addressed in response to the inquiry from Councillor Hills to the mover and seconder that there would be just the full stop inserted after the word alcohol. Because I would assume that if the entire section was to be removed, it then becomes silent, in which case you could interpret it as, well, it now becomes a permissible thing, which I think is not what the mover and the seconder of the amendment were seeking to do. Look, for me, the worst thing in the world for me is to have to go to a cocktail function and somebody hands me a glass of wine. I mean, I'm so antisocial that that's not really my thing. But so I'm. I just wonder if the mover and the seconder could reflect on the fact that the provision in the schedule, and someone who doesn't drink alcohol, but the provision in the schedule does note that the expenditure is regarded as sensitive expenditure. And I can't imagine a greater risk to anybody in elected public office than to try and to liberally interpret the permission of the sale and purchase of alcohol. That it would, I can't imagine a situation where you could get yourself into hot water than to misuse this particular provision. So I'm wondering if the mover and the seconder could reflect upon that as sufficient protection against the perception that this is going to be misused by the mayor, the deputy mayor, or whoever's hosting somebody as part of a delegation. Unfortunately, I can't support this amendment because I just think that there are times when it becomes impractical for something to take place where actually the council doesn't pay for alcohol. And so I would prefer that the amendment be withdrawn. If it isn't withdrawn, even with the amendment, I won't be supporting it.
Thank you very much. I knew I put a mocker on this discussion as soon as I said we could finish by lunchtime. I'll promise never to do that again. I think we've heard the arguments. Sorry. Councillor Coon.
Oh, if I could, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry to keep dragging this on, and I'm feeling the Deputy Mayor's pain that we spend more time talking about our expenses policy than we have on the budget. So I do feel that, and I appreciate where Councillor Casey's coming from, but I think I'm taking up on what Warwick has said. This is a very conservative policy. It gives the discretion, and it is, you don't want it to be so black and white that an elected member could be hosting or in a situation that, you know, something that is very approved and totally above board, and you just get sprung for, you know, a bottle of sake has been added onto, you know, in terms of hosting a manaakitanga. There's all sorts of scenarios you can see that it would be very, very regulated and controlled. And so I think we've got a really good expenses policy. And I did just want to add, in terms of why I'm not supporting this amendment, is that I got contacted by a member for Southland, and he was telling me that he can't, and Warwick helped me with this query because he was asking about our expenses policy, and he can't even claim to be able to go and visit his ward it includes Stewart Island. And so he's got huge expenses to cover and a very small remuneration. And I was thinking, I'm very fortunate in my ward I can visit, I'm the only member who has to get on a plane to go and visit my constituents, and I appreciate the policy we have and what it covers. And I think it is very sensible. It hits the right balance, and it already is taking a very conservative approach. So that's why I don't support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I think we've exhausted the speaking list.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. I can read the writing on the wall. This has happened every time the expense policy has come up. Thank you for the debate. I will be withdrawing the amendment.
Thank you. If Councillor Collins, you need to concur with that. Thank you, Councillor. Look, okay, I think the matter is resolved. The difficulty that we haven't resolved is that there may be a perception now that we are splashing money around on alcohol. I'm happy for all of our books to be opened up, because I believe that the amount that we spend on alcohol under the travel expenses section would be minimal, if not for months at a time, non-existent. I will ask council officers to come back on us, but we certainly have no culture in this organisation of wasting, misusing taxpayer money on alcohol. But I just want that clarified, because I wouldn't want the result of this discussion in public to be taken as councillors pass emergency budget but then allow free spending on alcohol. So we need, I'm more than happy for our books to be opened up on that for travel expenses, because I think it will be very low indeed. Councillor Watson, I'm sorry, I've probably opened up the debate again.
Not a debate, just more than happy to provide a historical minute to that suggestion, Mr Mayor. I think the last time alcohol was served in here to the council, I think, was December 2014 with Mayor Brown. Didn't happen again after that, and I'm pretty sure that it was complimentary wine from some Chinese delegation. So if that could be minuted, I think we've got a 6 months on the wagon at Rotorua Island in between as far as elected members go.
So look, maybe it is a case simply of asking officers, so that this is in public and transparent, that we report on expenditure under the said section on alcohol historically over the last 3.5 years, because I think it won't be hard to find out, because it'll be pretty minimal. Yep.
As far as I know, the council buy no alcohol from either the Wiri or Waitakere or Portage Licensing Trusts, so we had no conflict in supporting this policy.
And we were looking at you to be one of the sponsors. Councillor Darby. Councillor Darby.
Thanks, and I think, Mayor, you're right. It would be good to have all these expenses be transparent at one place, so that they can actually be read and be attributed to individuals, and I'm happy to that. But I do say, let's identify what is that benefit of our free car parking as well. I estimate that free car parking is $125,000 per annum. Now, Kevin, you know what the value of a car park is through your property team, so that should also be identified. We don't take it as a cost, but it is actually a cost. It's 1.25 million over your 10-year budget that you could be investing elsewhere. Let's just be transparent about those benefits as well that we don't claim for, because they're just assumed.
Thank you. Look, I think we're ready to put the resolutions now. Sharon, you haven't spoken.
Oh, sorry.
I'm just finding this really interesting. Something that I think, Phil, you'll probably remember Sir Barry Curtis, when we had travel meeting, if anybody was going for travel, whether it was overseas or down to Wellington or to wherever they were going, it would have to be ratified by the full council or that committee, so we all know who's travelling and where they're going. And for those that really are wanting to take public transport, perhaps instead, and I just see that Julia Gent has just put a thing up, I think, that to go by train instead of to fly. So for those of you that are really wanting to save the ratepayers' money, and you don't want to fly, and you really want to save that money, go the night before, public transport, catch the train, and if you're going to an island, you could sail or you could row your boat.
Thank you. Councillor Philippina, to conclude. Order, please.
Just want to say I feel safe now going back to my chair as a result of it being withdrawn. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Look, let's just put it to a vote, but I am keen for that, the expenditure to be absolutely transparent, because I do not believe that this council wastes ratepayers' money or spends it extravagantly. So I'm going to put the recommendations A to C. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. Thank you. We have now concluded item number 12. Item number 13 is an open process report only, appointments to the demographic advisory panels. It's been moved by Councillor Casey, seconded by Councillor Mulholland. We will come to that under confidential, because of the identities of the individuals should not be known until after police checks and after we have made the announcement. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. Item number 14 is summary of governing body and committee information, memoranda and briefing. It's moved by Councillor Cooper, seconded by Councillor Bartley this time. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. Item number 15 is summary of confidential decisions and related information that has been released publicly. I'll ask for Councillor Mulholland had her hand up, so she's going to move this one. Do I have a second to Councillor Sayers? All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. There is no extraordinary business, so I will move that the procedural motion to exclude the public on the basis that the information we'll discuss about the demographic advisory panel candidates is personal and shouldn't be made public until the governing body endorses a candidate and the Ministry of Justice criminal history check is completed. I have a seconder and a deputy mayor. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. We have one last item to go, councillors. I'll just give a minute for us to go into confidential and for the doors to be closed.